Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're here to talk about the Topaz Obsessions palette from Huda Beauty. I think I've made myself very clear on these mini Obsessions palettes that she has put out. I have not yet come across a dud. I have all of the ones that she has released, and the only two that I've not yet played with are the Sapphire and the Emerald ones. So I can't speak to these ones, but all of the rest of them have kind of knocked my socks off, to be honest. I will insert some cards for the other two in this limited edition set that I have reviewed, just in case you're curious. And without further ado, let's do this. When I reviewed the Ruby Obsessions and the Amethyst Obsessions, I included demos showing me applying the eyeshadows. I'm not going to include that in this video because I'm going to spend a little bit more time comparing this palette to one of the pre-existing ones, which is the Warm Brown Obsessions palette. When I first saw pictures of this one, I thought, no, don't need it because I have this one. And then I saw it in person in the store, swatched it, played around with it a bit, and I want to actually compare them sort of shadow for shadow. Also, I am wearing it now. I put this on literally 12 hours ago, more than 12 hours ago. It's just about 9 o'clock now. I applied it around 7:45 this morning. I'm gonna bump it in and just show you what we're working with over 12 hours later. I have not touched it up. The only thing I have touched up is the inner corner highlight, because that wasn't a shadow that I used from this palette. So, bear with me. All right, let's not judge the state of my concealer, because that has also been 12 hours in the making. But what I really wanted to show was just how shimmery these shadows still are, how the dark shades are still dark and you can still see them. The lower lash line shadow hasn't, sometimes it almost dissolves down, it starts up here and then gravity throughout the course of the day, it kind of drags it down. The shimmer, like I said, I have not touched up at all, and it's still very vibrant. It hasn't creased up, it hasn't faded, and it's not splotchy. I am so incredibly impressed with the longevity of these eyeshadows that this is why I chose to forego showing you a demonstration of it, because I wanted to show the wear test of it. For 12 hours, that's pretty stinking impressive. All right, let's get into comparisons now. So on this hand, we have the Topaz palette. Focus. And here is the Warm Brown palette. So at first blush, I thought that they looked a little too similar for my liking, and then when I really did compare them side by side, while there are some similarities, there's enough difference to make it, if this was one palette, I'd be really happy with that. So there is room for both in your collection, and I'm just gonna go through and swatch all of the ones from this one and compare them to the similar tones over here. So as you can see, I have grouped them by finish, so the mattes are over here and then the more shimmery shadows are down here. I say this in basically every video in which I do swatches, but I did not prime my arm. I just run my finger around the pan a couple of times and then do one swipe down. I have not smoothed them out or anything like that, so this is just literally one finger swatch down. And you can see, particularly with the mattes there's a lot of really good pigmentation going on. The deep one has a little bit of patchiness to it, but if I smooth that out, you can see just how nicely it really is to work with, and it blends quite nicely as well. And then over here with the more metallic finishes, I cannot fault them at all. They are so beautiful. One of the things that I say it over and over and over again about these mini palettes is that the selection of shades is so well done because you don't have overlap in tones. You still get a good variety to work with even though there's only 9 pans. You can see that, obviously with the mattes over here, but even with these more metallic shades over here, everything is different. So you have a very coppery color, you have a very gold one. This one's like a really deep brass, and this one almost has like a pinky element to it, sort of a rose gold. That's the one that I have on my eyelids today. I'm just going to wash this off and swatch some of the shades that look comparable to each other. I'm not going to swatch both palettes and compare them because there are some very obvious differences as well, like in terms of this shade here and this purple down here. So bear with me. I'm going to pick and choose, and then we'll compare them and see if you really need both palettes or not. So first up are the dark brown shades that are in here. This one is from the Warm Browns. This is from Topaz. They are very similar, like almost spot on dupes. When I look at it up close myself, there's a little bit more ashiness in the one from the Warm Browns than there is in Topaz. But realistically, once they're applied to the eyes and blended out, you're really not going to be able to notice the difference between the two of them. So while there are slight differences between them, like this one's just a little bit more chocolatey. This one has almost like a hint of like a purplish kind of deal. They are basically the same. Yeah, like they're very, very close. This one just looks, I don't know how to say it, like it looks a little duller, but I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't know how else to describe it, but you can see there they are very, very similar. Next up are the more warm tones that are in the palettes. These two again are from the Warm Brown palette, and then this one and this one are from Topaz. And you can see again that there are differences between the two. Very similar, but these ones are quite different from each other. These ones, again, I think once they're applied to the eye, you're really not going to be able to detect the difference. So if you have one over the other, I don't really think you're going to feel like you're missing out on anything. But I did want to just compare those just so you can see what the two options are. And then finally we have the similar shimmer shade. So this is the only shimmer shadow that is in the Warm Brown palette, and then there are two of them from the Topaz. The other two I think are very obviously different, so I didn't swatch them out. And you can see that these two are very close, and again, I don't know if you had one over the other that you would really notice that you're missing anything. Like I don't. There is a difference. There is, but again, if you have one, you probably don't need the other one. The main difference is that the one in the Topaz palette has just a hint of like micro glitter in it. So it is a little bit more shimmery and a little bit more high impact than the one from Warm Brown. But again, I think that's kind of splitting hairs. So I know I started this video saying, I think there's room for both of them in your collection. I leave that to you to decide because there is certainly overlap. Now there are different shades as well, so really we've just kind of found similarities in 3 out of 9. So I think if you're debating between these two, or if you already own one and you're debating whether or not to pick up the other, it's really going to come down to personal preference between these two. This one is far more heavily matte. Again, there's only one shimmer shadow in there, whereas this one is a little bit more of an even balance with 5 mattes and 4 shimmers. For me personally, that's going to edge me towards this one simply because that's what my preferences are. But overall, I mean, the tones are quite similar. You have that warm brown sort of feel going with both of them. This one has the nice inclusion of the yellow as well, which is missing from here. I can't really say that I prefer one over the other in terms of how they apply and how they wear, how they blend, all of that. I really, like I said, all of the ones that I have played with, all of the entire set except for 2 at this point, have knocked it out of the park for me. I have not come across a dud palette yet. I think the mattes are velvety smooth, they blend beautifully. I tend to just have a lighter hand when it comes to eyeshadow anyway, so I tend to build up the pigmentation, so I don't mind dipping back in a couple of times. These powders are not super crumbly and super soft, so there's not a huge amount of kick up. I don't experience any fallout when I'm applying them. They're just fantastic eyeshadows to work with. The shimmer shadows, I can pick them up with a brush, I can apply them with a finger. When I use a brush, I almost always use a setting spray. It's just sort of habit at this point. I will point out that with this Topaz palette, it's almost like there's two finishes amongst the shimmery ones. So the coppery shade over here, or the bronzy shade over here, and the more like champagne gold over here are very much, I don't want to say satin because they are metallic, but they're not particularly foiled, if that makes sense. They're more of a subtle sheen, and so they are a little bit smoother to work with, whereas the other two, they have a bit more of that micro glitter in them, and I do find, you can probably see it in this pan here, that they can bunch up a little bit when you're using pressure on them with a brush or a finger. So it's not that I think they're particularly delicate, it's just something that I wanted you to be aware of. So go in particularly with those two shades with sort of a delicate hand and you should be fine. So for $35 each, these palettes are so good. They are so good. I am really excited to play around with the last two that I have and give you some ideas on those ones as well. I really hope that Huda Beauty continues to put these kind of palettes out so long as they continue to be executed as well as they are. I don't want to see palettes for the sake of palettes, if that makes sense. I think all the ones that they've put out so far have been just perfectly curated. I know I say that in pretty much every one of these reviews, but it's really true. For what it's worth, I am happy that I purchased this one, even though I already have this one. I think they work really well in tandem with each other, and I think they kind of complement each other in that sense. So where it's lacking over in this palette, there's something over here, and vice versa. Although that's kind of a misnomer. I don't want to say lacking because I don't really think either palette in and of itself is lacking anything. I just think that they work so nicely together. And like I said at the beginning, if they were one palette, I would be quite stoked about that. Kind of gives me, actually holding it up like that, it kind of gives me Natasha Denona Sunset palette vibes, but at a fraction of the price. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up there because I really don't have much else to say. I think they're fantastic palettes. If I haven't already made that obvious, I like them. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now. My hands are so dirty, 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 like me when I was